When You Look at Me. Written by Just Thinking Drabbles. Read by Arashi. Hubert had never really cared to be the class representative for the White Heron Cup. There were so many other suitable candidates, and more eager ones at that. It's not that he was terrible at dancing, of course. At the very least, he could waltz without stepping on anyone's toes. And really, that was all that mattered. No, his caliber on the dance floor had nothing to do with his opposition towards being the representative. In truth, Hubert felt that he was not physically appealing enough to participate, let alone win. And it wasn't that he cared about what anyone else thought, but he wanted their class to have a fighting chance. And with him, such a victory seemed far less obtainable. That's why, when the professor had asked him to participate, he couldn't help but chuckle. Hubert von Vestra, a dancer? Preposterous. They were surely going to lose. It made him rather curious as to what was going through their mind when they decided that he would be the best choice. Surely it wasn't because no one was offering. After all, a certain obnoxious redhead had been particularly vocal about desiring the position. So then, why had they instead chosen him? The mystery continued to baffle Hubert for days, even into the day of the actual competition. As he stood next to the other contestants and waited for the event to begin, he felt the urge to laugh once more. For the Golden Deer, they had selected Hilda, and for the Blue Lions, they had chosen Sylvain, both of whom held more charm in a single smile than Hubert could ever hope to possess. Hubert was called many things: a shadow, a menace, a coffin-dweller. But charming? Never. And he had never had a desire to be called so either. Now, though, it seemed he needed this elusive charm. Yet, no matter how presentable he tried to look, the aspect was not his to be had. Feeling an unusual burst of nerves flutter through his stomach, he turned towards his classmates, who were all seated nearby. Most of them were busy chatting together about goddess knew what, except Linhart, who was asleep, and Bernadetta, who was more content to simply sit there and scribble in her notebook. His eyes drew subconsciously to locks of fiery red hair and amber eyes which, at present, were not focused on him. He supposed it was for the best, as often when they were looking at Hubert, those eyes held nothing but anger and barely concealed contempt. But nonetheless, Hubert found strangely that he wanted to see Ferdinand's gaze on him, whether it was an angered one or not. He wondered if, while he was dancing, those aggravating, beautiful eyes would fall to him, linger for a minute, or perhaps longer. Hubert shook his head and scoffed. Why was he yearning for such a thing? Ferdinand hated him, and he... Well, it didn't really matter how Hubert felt. Those feelings could not be if he wished to achieve the future that he and Lady Edelgard were working towards. Too many things were uncertain, and too much was at stake to seek out anything more. Hubert was actually thankful when the competition started, as it meant that he could focus instead on dancing, instead of the endless circles of thoughts running around inside of his head. Or so he thought. The moment that he stepped onto the floor between the other two contestants, he saw Ferdinand turn, and their eyes met. Hubert almost froze at the sight of furrowed brows and a narrowed gaze. He was indeed angry. But even still, he was looking. Hubert smiled to himself. It was a silly thing to feel happy over, but he couldn't help himself. Ferdinand was looking at him. As Hubert completed the dance, he found that he didn't care that his competitors were better, or that he was most certainly going to lose. If it allowed him to hold Ferdinand's attention, even for a moment, then this entire ridiculous debacle would actually feel worth it. When the bell sounded to notify everyone of the ending of the event, Hubert stood in anticipation for the inevitable outcome. He felt breathless and exhausted, in more ways than one, but he was thankful that it would soon be over, so that he could continue on with his day as normal. He looked up, hoping to catch Ferdinand's angered gaze one last time. But as their eyes met once more, he did not find the same upset glare that he had before. Instead, he found a much softer, considerably more awestruck expression, peering back at him. Hubert felt a blush creep onto his face, and he turned his head away. Why did he look so amazed? So enamored? And why, of all people there, was he looking at Hubert with it? Avestra was not beautiful nor charming. Their very name was synonymous with all things vile and frightening. Hubert himself had never received any kindness from being one, except from Edelgard. He wasn't used to the attention. Not the good kind, at least. He was used to darkness, and rumors and slander. He was a weapon to be used and tossed aside. He was not someone to be complimented and mesmerized with. Yet there Ferdinand was, with his bright eyes wide, mouth agape, and cheeks flushed. It was an unbearably lovely sight, and Hubert couldn't bring himself to look at him. Then, to Hubert's great shock, it was announced that the Black Eagles were the winners of the White Heron Cup. And suddenly, Ferdinand's surprised look started to make sense. Perhaps it was not a look of enchantment, but one of disgust. He wouldn't fault him for it. The idea of Hubert being the winner was ridiculous. But now, he felt silly for even thinking that Ferdinand would ever look at him with anything other than malice. While everyone else was still chatting amongst themselves, Hubert hurriedly snuck away before anyone could come and congratulate him. He didn't care about celebrating, and he really did not want the attention. He just wanted to hide away for the rest of the day and wait for all the excitement to blow over. But just as he thought he had left without notice, he heard footsteps rushing towards him from behind, loud ones, which seemed almost as if they were meant to announce the person they belonged to. He balled his hands into a fist and tried to fasten his pace. Yet, even with his longer legs, he was not able to outrun Ferdinand. "Hubert, wait! May I speak with you for a moment?" Hubert briefly debated ignoring him and continuing on his way, but one could not simply ignore Ferdinand von Eyre. So instead, he huffed and halted his pace, causing the redhead to practically bump into him as he did. When Hubert turned to face him, he grit his teeth and crossed his arms in hopes that he would be able to appear aloof and intimidating. To his dismay, his stance had little effect on his classmate. "What, Ferdinand? What could you possibly need from me right now?" "Well, I—" He trailed off as he ran nervous fingers through his bright locks of hair. Hubert entertained the thought of running his own hands through those same beautiful tresses for only a second, but it was enough to cause his heart to ache from a want that he'll never be able to experience. "Spit it out, Eyre!" Hubert felt himself growing impatient. He couldn't stand staring at him for longer than needed. It hurt too much. The unnecessarily angry tone caused a hurt look to cross the younger nobleman's face, and Hubert thought that he sort of looked like a dejected puppy who had been disciplined. He would have found it an adorable thing if he didn't feel so guilty about making him upset. "I am sorry, Hubert. I'm sure you must be busy. I just wanted to congratulate you on your win, and to apologize. I truly am sorry. The professor was right to choose you. You were absolutely beautiful." Beautiful?" Hubert sputtered as his arms fell to his sides and his cheeks bloomed with warmth. At realizing what he had said, Ferdinand's cheeks also reddened, and he stepped backwards nervously. Your dancing, that is. Your dancing was beautiful. Anyways, that was all I wanted to say. Please, don't let me keep you any longer," said Ferdinand, and with a bow, he quickly exited the room. Hubert stood frozen, his feet practically immovable, as he lifted the back of his hand to his face to try and hide his blush. Beautiful. He thought I was beautiful. Maybe becoming a dancer wouldn't be such a bad thing after all.